Good morning, councillors. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee. This meeting is open to the public. It's also live streamed. I'd like to thank those who are in the room with us today. I'd like to acknowledge our General Manager, Nicola, CEO Brian, councillors. Is the Mayor with us? So you might be. Okay. I haven't forgotten anyone, have I? I don't think so. If I have, please excuse me. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land we meet this morning. I'd like to acknowledge the song lines that crisscross these lands, and we heard about connection this morning at the mayoral prayer breakfast, which was really interesting and very important to First Nations people. I'd like to acknowledge the Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarowa peoples and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. If we go to item 2, attendance, including apologies, leave of absence. We've acknowledged the Mayor. Might be he's a bit late, but anyone wishing to get grant for leave of absence? If not, Councillor O'Hara Sullivan, we already know that she's a leave of absence. Yes, that's correct. Councillor Shines an apology, attending a funeral today. Is a mover and second? Could I have a mover? Councillor Jeff, Councillor Carroll. Those in favour? That's carried. So if we move on to item 3, plumbing and drainage regulation. Adam, you're going to speak to that straight up? And I think this is pretty much a procedural matter of change so that we can efficiently offer service to the community. Over to you, Adam.
Good morning, councillors, through the chair. So, as Councillor Bill had mentioned, the reason we're here today is to opt in for Fast Track. The Plumbing and Drainage Act requires a resolution of council for us to be able to opt in or out of Fast Track. It only relates to Class 1 dwellings which have sewer, which is a house that is connected to the sewer network, so it won't apply to anything with on-site treatment facilities or anything else like that. The old system does remain in place if anyone, because this system's for e-lodgements only, so if anyone isn't familiar with computers and all that sort of stuff, they can still use the old system. So essentially it makes the assessment of the design an administrative process, and we assess it on site with our inspection in the field, where we've got a 1-to-1 scale model instead of a drawn plan. Other than that, there's not a huge change in the process. It just means you can start construction a lot earlier without waiting the 10 days for us to assess it and give an approval. They've still got to lodge the application. We issue a notification that we've received it and they're ready that they're right to start construction. All that is an automated or a fairly automated process. So it's it's quite efficient from our end. A lot of South East Queensland councils have already adopted it, and we've visited them and been talking to them a fair bit, and they're quite comfortable with the process. It's been working really well. I think in 2018 we chose to not put in. We thought that it would burden our staff, and it's not been the reality for those councils. Any questions?
Oh, sorry, not really a question, but a comment, I guess. And I guess sometimes it's best not to be an early adopter with some of these things, and that's the approach we took to see how that would roll out.
Yep.
So I commend the officers for bringing this back to us through you, Chair, to bring this forward. I'm happy to move it as per the recommendation.
Okay, we've got a mover and a seconder. There's no further discussion. Those in favour? So that's Councillor Jeff and Councillor Carroll. And all in favour. Councillors, I apologise. I didn't actually mention, I don't have any declarations before me here, but if something pops up as far as anything that needs to be raised, please feel free to do so. If we move now to item 4, regional development statistics, I'll hand straight over to Nicola.
Thank you very much, Chair. And the purpose of this report is to keep the Council informed of development applications and trends. And I'll take the report as read and open up to any questions you may have.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Jeff?
Thanks, Chair. Through you to GM Nicola. Nicola, on page 33 is just the lots in assessment and construction pipeline, which is a valuable snapshot of where things are at, and it's, you know, hovers around those between 1,200 and 1,500, has done for some time. I'm just wondering, given that council through the Toowoomba Futures and working with UDIA have agreed upon that we have within the priority infrastructure area around about 16 years of supply of developable land. Can you just enlighten us on how we're tracking in regard to, say, lots, sealed lots? Because there was a number between 600 and 800, and 800 seemed to be the conversation that we'd had in workshops. And noting that in the past years we have had as high as 1,200 lots, actually. So the minimum is 600. I'm just wondering, with the state of play, with, you know, cash rate increasing, cost of goods, even labour market or staff market, just wondering how we're tracking for this current financial year to reach, say, the minimum of 600 lots.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll actually hand to Adam, who's done some put some statistics together for you in that regard.
Through the Chair. So yeah, as you're all aware, my team, we've got the delivery of development. So I've got the team that does operational work assessment plus construction on the ground and the survey plan seals. So at the moment we are, I think we're sitting at 358 financial year to date, well, to the end of April. So that, in my view, would be a bit lower than historical trends. We do have a lot being constructed. As you can see, there's about 600 lots being constructed, nearly a year's supply, but construction is proving very difficult at the moment. Supply is challenging. Getting approvals out of Ergon, and that is taking a lot longer now than ever has. It's within 6 to 9 months just for an approval at Ergon for, you know, their electrical layout and stuff like that. So there's a lot of challenges facing construction, rising costs, people, materials. So we're seeing a lot of construction times being blown out quite substantially. Yeah. So, but overall, I think we are lower than historical trends.
Thanks, through you, Chair. Thanks, Adam. And I guess that's probably a something to highlight for our community as well when we're talking about housing affordability and the amount of housing on the market to actually sell or purchase, or to rent for that matter, is an ongoing issue. And from what you've said, even interventions from federal or state government in regard to building incentives may not actually hit the mark. It's more getting the lots on the market in the first instance, and it's the whole supply chain, even to the final opening or turning of the door to get into the house. So do you, or are you modelling any, and maybe it's a question on notice for it to come back next month, what this might look like given that we've had interest from a Brisbane Housing Company, which we've worked with, and it's on the public record for social affordable market value, of how that fits into the mix and getting that to market. So I guess it's a question on notice to the GM in regard to perhaps even next Tuesday's update, GM's update. Maybe it's something we can touch on because it's no doubt it's an issue not just for us but across the nation at the moment. So I appreciate the information and the challenges that the development industry have as well in this space. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor, and through the chair, there has been some analysis as part of the Toowoomba Region's Futures program, and I actually saw it yesterday, and that included the impact of any particular incentives we might have. So it is something that we are considering, and we would be happy to provide more guidance.
Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, your point, thank you for that, Adam, but your point about some of the delays and some of the practical roadblocks that are leading to those delays. I've had feedback from providers such as Ergon that one of the areas where there's delays is actually with the traffic management plans. We keep talking about these traffic management plans and they pop up in all these different areas of council, but even in the planning and development space, because they're saying that they need to assess where to lay their infrastructure. They need to apply for the traffic management plans, and whatever's happening with the traffic management plans, there's delays there. That has these knock-on effects all the way down, and right down the end of the line are people not getting houses built.
No, that's right. So, through the chair, so for clarity, that is an area that in my purview, but it is a fair statement that there is legislation for traffic management plans that changed, I believe it was last year, if that's correct, and it was driven by the state, and there was a lot of extra, I guess, safety considerations and things that make it a lot harder to get traffic permits. The part of from the Ergon side of it, I know there's probably a bit of to and fro with it, is prior to the storms last year, they had a lot more freeboard in their side of it as well, and they're now probably just like everyone, under-resourced and all the rest, and they're struggling to catch up with and I guess this is also not helping with that. It's sort of also setting them back. It's not the only point, we're having trouble with. It seems like every point along the way is problematic. For instance, my guys, we're down a fair way in terms of vacancy rates, and it's hard for us to be out doing construction. And so there's just every step of the way it's sort of like treacle at the moment.
Chair, to flag again that it's one that we should take to LGAQ, because it's not just Toowoomba Regional Council, obviously, that is experiencing this. It's all councils under that changed legislation, but we're the ones that are closest to the community, and we hear the feedback. So that's the appropriate forum, it would seem, to run something through all councils through LGAQ.
Yeah, I tend to agree, Councillor Rebecca. It's a good forum to raise it in. In fact, in the meeting with UDIA yesterday, there was comments about that very thing, about raising it, and also UDIA raising it, because it is council there's a misconception that it's council policy, but we've actually got to adhere to the legislative requirements, and council is responsible for that public realm as the road authority. So you wouldn't like to test out some of those instances where things go wrong. So, but there is a willingness, is my takeaway from the meeting, for both council and the industry to come together to see what we can do to streamline that. That'd be a fair comment, GM, Nicola and Adam. So, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The LGAQ Roads and Transport Conference advisory committee looking at this, and policy executive of LGAQ have also looked at some of the concerns around this. Of course, it's a very, it's not as plain as it seems, because there have been a lot of road workers and people killed around road closures, in even simple small ones where, and certainly council and TMR road workers have actually lost their lives around roadworks. So I think we probably will just check, but I'm certain that LGAQ will take, policy executive will take something of this nature, and perhaps the CEO can check with LGAQ, but I'm pretty certain that they will be taking a balanced look at this to the conference, I feel. It came through our advisory probably about 3 weeks ago. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Nancy?
Thank you, Chair. I feel the traffic management plans have become ridiculously onerous and a real burden for local government. Yesterday I went through one that had traffic lights plus people monitoring it. Then after you got through the roadworks, there was an expectation that you drive 60 kilometres an hour for another kilometre after you've left the roadworks. I mean, that's just ridiculous, and it's an impost on drivers, and to have these great expectations of so much put into these plans causes the delay, and then it has the impact on the drivers as well. So it's multiple effect, and I'd like to see that we do find out from LGAQ as quickly as possible, and then perhaps have a motion that goes to the LGAQ conference in October as well. Even though that delays it further down the track, at least it'll go to the conference, and I imagine there will be a lot of people having a lot to say about them.
So on that point, Mr. CEO, is that okay if we follow that up and at an appropriate time when we actually determine what topics we want to be submitted to the local government forum conference, we can definitely make a note of that one. It may already be there, but we can actually throw our 2 bobs into the ring and say, well, we want this taken up as well. So, okie doke. Any further comments around the report?
Well, happy to move if there's no further comments.
Councillor Jeff moves, Councillor Melissa seconds. Those in favour? It's carried. My iPad has gone to sleep. Thanks, Adam. No, it's all right. We now, item 5, we now move into confidential, so we need to close the meeting to discuss the matters there. Do I have a mover? Councillor Paul and Councillor Carroll, second. Those in favour? That's carried. So you let us know, Wendy, when you're ready. Thank you, guys. Councillors, we come to the items. Where are we? Lost my place. Confidential item number 6. There's a committee recommendation there before you that council appoint 2 representatives from the community to the Environment Advisory Committee in accordance with the terms of reference as follows. Jacinta Cox and Professor John Bennett. Do I have a mover? Councillor Nancy, Councillor Paul. Those in favour? It's carried. The next item is the Toowoomba Region Futures Project update. And have before you a committee recommendation that this matter be deferred for further consideration at the ordinary meeting of Council on Tuesday 16th of May 2023. Councillor Tim and Councillor Melissa, those in favour? That's carried. That concludes the Planning and Development Committee for the 9th of May. Thanks, councillors, for your input. Do you want to have a small break? How long? 10 minutes? Okay, thanks.
Right, Wendy? All right, welcome to the Water and Waste Committee meeting for May for Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I'd like to thank those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge anyone who's watching on the social media channels. I acknowledge Portfolio Lead Councillor Summerfield, the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, my council colleagues, Acting General Manager Matt and the CEO. We have a leave of absence that's previously been granted for Councillor O'Hara Sullivan. That doesn't require any motion, but I do need a motion for the apology for Councillor Shine. Do I have a mover? Councillor Taylor, Councillor Carl as a seconder, all in favour. Councillor Carol Taylor was the mover, Councillor Bill Carl is the seconder. Thanks, Wendy. That was carried unanimously. There's no items on the agenda today, so with that, I close the meeting, 11:01. Thank you.
It must have been left on, sorry. I've just turned it off. Welcome everybody to the Infrastructure Committee meeting of Toowoomba Regional Council for May. The meeting's open to the public and is being live streamed. I wish to acknowledge the ISG Portfolio Lead, Councillor Melissa Taylor. Welcome Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Councillors, and our General Manager, Mr Mike Brady and his team. I've been advised of one declaration of interest to be recorded at the Infrastructure Committee meeting on the 9th of May 2023. Councillor Von Hoff's declaration in relation to item number 4, revised policy 2.21, road network upgrades and extension. Councillor Von Hoff, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I inform this meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 150 EN of the Local Government Act 2009. Hold on. Continue.
Yes, thank you.
The nature of my interest is as follows. The declarable conflict of interest arises because attachment 1, confidential, involved parties, lists the involved parties as the residents on certain roads and that the role of the involved parties is as property owners. The residents on 3 of these roads are my family. I propose to leave and stay away from the place where the meeting is being held while this matter is discussed and voted on.
Thank you, Councillor Von Hoff. I wish to acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, the Gabal and the Jadawa and Bigambul peoples, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. Thank you. We have 2 items on our agenda today, this month, And I'd like to ask Councillor, sorry. Apologies, there's no apologies. Oh, Councillor, I'm sorry, yes there is. We do have a motion, apology, recognising Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan's absence, and they were successful in reaching base camp, and that's really, really good. We had a photograph through on social media, so well done to the Momentum Health team. And Councillor Shine is away attending a funeral today. So can I have him, moved Councillor Jeff McDonald, seconded Councillor Bill Cale, that we accept Councillor Kerry Shine's apology for this meeting. All in favour? It's carried, thank you. I'd like to welcome the team from ISG, and in particular for this first fleet transition to sustainable fuel plan, I'd like to recognise our manager of fleet, Brenda Kelly, and Jed, who's the new principal fleet management for Toowoomba Regional Council. Thank you, Jed. Would you just like to stand up? I don't think councillors have met you. Thank you, Jed. Welcome. And Rodney Betts, our manager of transport and drainage planning. We've got our two angels down the back there, Jackie Luck and Lauren. And I'd now like to hand over to our General Manager, Mike Brady, to introduce the item. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. As Councillor Taylor said, there's two reports before you this morning, and the first one I'm pleased to bring forth to you is one that's sort of been in the making for a little while, but the work behind the scenes in what the team has been focusing on for a number of years actually is, very closely watching what industry is doing in the changes from transitioning into sustainable fuels. And this is a very exciting area of what's happening around the world, and obviously Australia is sort of not at the leading edge, but with the manufacturers and that, we're coming on board as well over the years ahead. The report basically goes into requesting council to endorse the fleet transition strategy, sustainable fuel plan, and there's an action plan there, and continue what we've already started. So we've already got a couple of electric vehicles in the fleet, mowers and the like, and looking at opportunities and options when we're purchasing any new plant going forward. We presented this fleet transition plan to council back in March in an information session, gave you some opportunity there to get a greater idea of what things were about and where we're thinking of heading. And so today it gives council the opportunity to support that and going forward. So it is a journey. It's something that we'll look at reviewing every few years as both industry, the local government industry, but more as technology evolves and as car manufacturers and other plant and fleet manufacturers bring forth stuff. We'll be looking at those opportunities. I've got Brenda here today, so any good questions? I'll give across to Brenda, but happy to take questions from here through you, Councillor
Thank
Taylor.
you, councillors. Any questions? Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to Mike or Brenda, indeed. Just in regard, as it makes me wonder across all of the local government sector how we may be able to leverage each other in some ways of learnings, and I wondered whether it might be something that could be discussed at a LGAQ conference around this technology moving forward, and whether you'd spoken with other local governments and got a feel for how they're travelling, and noting the state government's rollout is quite bullish, I would suggest, in some of the departments, but others aren't so much. And I just wonder whether local governments generally were moving at a similar pace to us.
The short answer is yes, local governments are probably at much the same rate that we are. It's not through LGAQ that we've been discussing with other local governments, it's through the IPWA. It's the IPWA fleet. So part of IPWA there is a fleet component, and it's more national rather than just state as well. So we've actually been having quite a number of conversations with councils based New South Wales and South Australia probably are the greatest areas that we've been having discussions with. The rollout is probably slow still at this stage, and that's not a bad thing at all. I think everyone is taking on board the learnings that everybody else is having, and there are substantial learnings in these rollouts. So, the transition will occur, but at the moment it is a reasonably measured transition. With the state government, the rollout, and you mentioned that it's of a bullish nature, you need to be aware of the wording that they're actually using. And the Queensland government have been very astute in using words along the lines of eligible vehicles. So their rollout for eligible vehicles has been quite bullish, but that's not the entire fleet. Okay, so again, they're taking that measured approach, knowing that particularly the infrastructure supporting the EV, so the charging infrastructure, is where as a whole country we've got a lot of work to do in that space.
Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Brenda. I've got a few questions that ran through my mind when I read that report, and it was things like for when staff take the EVs home, who pays for the solar infrastructure on the roof, who pays for the batteries, what size of pipe, and I'm talking electric pipe, would be required to go to a depot such as the one at Charlton or any of our other depots, and what sort of cost would be involved in delivering an electric power cord this big to start charging all these vehicles out there. Understanding that it's all of it, except for the only system I have seen where I felt that was a good outcome was where you've got a house, solar panels on the roof and a battery, and the person who owns the car drives in and charges it overnight while they're sleeping. To me, that's emissions done and dusted. It's a really good outcome if that's what we're focusing on. If we're focusing on looking after the environment, to me, that's a good outcome. Otherwise, they're all reliant on coal or gas to charge these vehicles. So, why would we do that, I guess? And then the cost and the life and the disposal and that sort of thing, that worries me. And then if we look at council's carbon footprint as a whole, and that's what we should be doing as an organisation, not just focusing on individual areas. We should be looking at council's carbon footprint as a whole. We all know that the landfill is the biggest one. I think the landfill is probably 60% of our carbon emissions for our organisation, and to me that's where we should be focusing on for this. And it concerns me that if we what's the wording, that we endorse the fleet transition to sustainable fuel action plan. What does that mean for us as councillors moving forward? What are the traffic lights for any further investment in EVs at this point in time? Because we are a vast region. We're not a city that's got charging points all around the corner, and we've got a staff member who's halfway between Gumbunji and Yarram and out of power, or if he gets to Gumbunji and then got to wait around for half an hour for it to charge. I just think this is quite 4 hours. It's so flawed at this point in time. I think we're too early. I'd like to see a hold put on this, to be honest. Yeah.
I'll hand across to Brenda in a moment. But just broadly speaking, we covered a lot of those issues in the information session, so that came up, and we did look at this not only from the carbon elements in regards to fleet, but very much holistically across council, and that's part of that information session, councillors may remember. But I also take your note to the background in the report on the third page, and the action plan itself. The steps that we're taking now is not to say today everything goes electric or to hydrogen or anything like that. That this is a journey and that we're commencing a journey. Okay, now we've commenced it in the background to start getting, you know, an idea of what industry is doing. But for instance, in the action plan, number 5 and number 6 of the action plan is noted on that third page of the report. That talks about the engagement with staff and the development of policies and everything. So we're still at that very much that infancy point in our journey here. This plan is not the plan to make wholesale changes in any way, shape or form over, you know, the near future, even the medium future. In the next three to 5 years, there'll be some change coming through, but it will evolve. And as Brenda was pointing it out, other levels of government, both state and federal, are coming through. But I'll just ask Brenda to add a couple of other points to that. Thanks, Brenda.
Thanks, Mike. The whole purpose of this plan is to give us a direction on what we need to look at, when we need to look at it, what we should be considering, what we don't need to consider. You're right, we don't currently have a policy for charging of EVs at home. We don't have that policy because we don't have the learnings. We're doing that right now. We're doing the learnings component so that when we write a policy, it is written with knowledge, and we're not just copying somebody else's policy, because what might work in Sydney may not necessarily work here. So right at the moment, for council and for fleet in particular, it's about learning what is the world of EVs going to mean. One of the greatest mistakes we could do would be to rush out now and try and transition a whole heap of vehicles to EV when the marketplace cannot sustain that. And at the moment, the marketplace is not available. There are not sufficient vehicles, there are not sufficient models and makes available for us to make good decisions on what will suit the organisation going forward. And one of the key components of the action plan is that we consider each and every asset on its merit to transition at the appropriate time. And some of those transitions may be 5 years away, they may be 10 years away. When it comes to heavy vehicles, when it comes to equipment, we could be another 15 plus years away before that transition actually happens. The action plan enables that flexibility so that we are dealing with what we can do today, what we can do tomorrow, but also what we should be doing in 5, 10, 15 years. This is a very long-term plan. By no means does it put council in any sort of a position to introduce EVs today, because we don't have the infrastructure to support that, nor do we have the policy positions for that. Nor the budget, can I say?
No.
Nor the budget, because at the moment, EVs, there is no price parity between an ICE vehicle and an EV. So right at the moment, the budget would not allow us to do this anyway.
Councillor Sunfield?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your responses. And yes, I'm well aware that this is a journey, that it's not going to be done tomorrow. I thought I indicated that when I spoke earlier. I've just read the financial resources implications again, and you know, we really don't know what it is going to cost us long term. And if we endorse this today, then in a year's time, 2 years' time, every time we say, look, you know, this is costing an outrageous amount of money, it'll be, will you endorse the plan? You endorse the plan on this date in 2023. And that's why I asked about the traffic lights. Where are the traffic lights on this? And there's mention in there about the budget, but it has to be more than just a budget consideration if we're going to start going down this path. And we need to understand what really are the costs. And to me, the biggest cost is going to be getting that pipe to that Charlton depot particularly, but all the depots will have to have one of some size or another, power pipe, that is. And so we need to understand what sort of costs we're talking about for the vehicles, what the costs are for setup, because you do have to plan for the bigger picture. You can't just put half a pipe there and say, well, that'll do for the time being because that's all the flight we've got, all the fleet we've got. You're going to need the big pipe right from the beginning, otherwise that's double cost. So I'm really concerned about the cost implications for council and really what are the environmental benefits that we're going to get out of it. Because at the moment, if we're charging them with coal or gas, there's none. So I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with this.
How can I? At the end of the day, the implementation of this action plan enables us to continue working with the broader industry. Whether we like it or not, EVs are coming. Will EVs be the answer for the future? It may not be, because there is an awful lot of research and development occurring in the spaces of hydrogen and other alternates. So I'm not going to say that we will have a fleet of 1,000 EVs in the future, because that may not very well be the case. The traffic lights come each financial year based on what we can afford to change. The traffic lights will also come when we're having conversations with the business units on suitability of what they require from an operational sense. The traffic lights will also come because we will need to work with the likes of property services to ensure that, and property services will be working with the likes of Ergon and our power distributors to understand what it is and what our limitations are likely to be at depots. There is no point trying to put in a direct current charging station in the likes of Gumbunji depot at the moment, because the grid could not sustain that. We can, however, today put in a direct current charging station at Charlton, because we have the solar system already set up and established. We have the conduit in place and established. It is ready for that. So we have those abilities to do that now. But they form part of our learnings for the future, and we must start the learnings today, because if we don't start our learnings for the future, we will miss opportunities when they arise. Did you want to add to that?
No, Councillor Rebecca?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Brenda. I welcome this, and Chair, at the appropriate time, I'm happy to move the motion. I'd be pleased to do so. I don't think we certainly can't be accused of rushing things. I remember in 2020 raising what's our plan. So it's now 2023 and we have our plan. And if we don't do this, the risk actually is that we'll end up potentially with stranded assets, and that is a cost to our ratepayers. I have two questions through you, Chair. The first is, Brenda, when you are having your conversations with the fleet acronym, which I didn't catch.
If we are fleet, yes.
Yeah, when you're having those conversations and you're talking about how that there have been substantial learnings from looking around, just top one or two, what have those been?
For me, the very first one is infrastructure. Infrastructure. We need charging infrastructure at home, at the workplace, and in the community. For EVs to roll out in bulk numbers, in huge numbers, which is obviously what the federal government is aiming for, if we don't have the infrastructure in place, we will have stranded vehicles on the sides of roads. Simple as that. Infrastructure is the big one.
Councillors, just for your information, Institute of Public Works Engineers it has the fleet. That's what IPWEAC is. Yeah. Just we use acronyms and just assume everyone knows, but that's what it is. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And was there a second one, second learning that you wanted to raise?
The second learning is there are limitations on distances with EVs. And that brings in the importance of the charging infrastructure. What we have been having in the last, say, 2 years is information coming from industry. We're now starting to get real life information, so as in people actually driving the vehicle for a number of years. So we're getting some of that real life scenario feedback. And I suppose some of the learnings for us is that the slower we go with this transition, probably the smarter we will be with the council. Having said that, there are some very obvious opportunities that we can take on right now that will not be impacted, but there are some things that we really need to be very mindful and watch the marketplace develop, because they're still developing. There's still a lot of research and developing going on in that marketplace.
I think the report talked about 600 kilometre range for some of the sedan vehicles. That was what the industry had been discussing. Is there any variation on that that you've heard from the driver's experience?
So extremes of temperature. So ideal temperatures for battery electric vehicles is sort of between probably from about 10 to 20, 25 or something like that. That's the best, that's the optimum temperatures. When we get the extremes either side, then the battery optimum reduces. So that's the feedback that we're getting. And some of the other feedback that we've received from the company that we're working with to install some of our charging infrastructure is, again, the western sun will impact on our charging infrastructure. So we have to be very mindful of where we place infrastructure in the future.
Good, thank you very much. My second question through you, Chair, to the CEO. Brian, can you remind us who actually has carriage of that work on council's emissions overall position and plan? Is it with planning or is it with water and waste?
I think it's water and waste at the moment, but I'll confirm that.
Thank you.
Council used to have a scientist that did all that, but I don't know. I'm like you, Councillor Rebecca, I'm not sure. Mr Mayor?
I was just wondering if there's many of the newer hybrid vehicles being bought. I'm familiar with some friends of mine who have them, and they're absolutely delighted with the economy of those vehicles and the savings they're making. So I'm just wondering if you've been looking, this has been a trend that way.
Yes, we have, I think we've currently got 2 or 3 hybrids already in the fleet. We've got probably that again on order. The problem with hybrids just at the moment is supply. If we could get a hybrid every day of the week, I would absolutely recommend hybrids over straight ICE vehicles. The economy has been really, really positive when it comes to the hybrids. And there are 2 different versions of hybrids. There's the self-regenerative, so Toyota RAV4s, we've got a couple of those in the fleet. So they're the self-regenerative, but we're also looking at bringing in the plug-in hybrids. So the PHEVs, they're referred to, plug-in hybrids as well. So, but again, it's the stock into Australia that we're struggling to get. Love to order get more, but that's the hiccup that we've currently got.
I think there's about a 10-month wait, isn't there, or 12 months?
There's a 14-month wait on one particular make and model. There's 16 months on another make and model, 18 months. We're talking, these vehicles are a long term out. The last conference that I was at, the optimists in the room, I suppose, were saying that we should see some fairly improvements to supply by the end of 2025. So we're a little way away from that just yet.
There is one in the council fleet. One of the Councillor Megan has a hybrid, but prior to that, our policy didn't allow us to pay that extra money. So from now on, perhaps it might change. Right, Mr Mayor? Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to follow up in regard to technology and how quickly it's moved. Like the depot was only open, it would be 3 years ago, almost this August. From where we are then, and you said infrastructure is so important, Brenda. So from learnings from that depot, what do you think, perhaps in hindsight, we could have done, knowing that that wasn't available then, or perhaps, and then you wonder in the life of this plan, saying your short, medium and long term, how relevant some of those longer term things might be in another 3 years.
Yeah, look, we should be planning today to have all this infrastructure in place within the next 2 to 3 years. The biggest learning with the depot at Charlton is that the conduit that was put in place specifically for their charging stations was the wrong size, so it wasn't big enough. But at the time, they would have assumed that it was big enough. But these are the learnings that we're now getting, is that the conduit must be of a substantial size. The solar panels, we certainly need more of them. We're actually installing one DC station at Charlton, and it is taking the whole of our spare capacity that we currently have at Charlton. So while the engineers at the time planned for what they thought was going to be the future, they've actually only planned for the next 2 years. And we need to start planning again for, if and when we introduce trucks, if and when we introduce yellow plant and all that sort of stuff, we're going to be looking at a whole lot of additional solar panels and a whole lot of batteries so that they can be charged at night when obviously the sun is not shining. So we need to capture the sun during the day and charge at night. And that's where we'll need those batteries.
And also, I guess, Councillor Jeff, you'd say that we had to go to a budget as well when we were building Charlton, so there would have been other things. Councillor Tim, sorry, I did miss you before. My apologies.
Right, Chair. Thanks, Brenda. Sorry to pick up on, so it's the sustainable vehicle strategy that we're endorsing, or the sustainable fuel action plan. But when I look at attachment 2, especially in number 2, it all talks about EV. So I'm talking about number 2, prepare, conduct and leverage trials. So a lot of it's EV from that space forward, and I don't see any hydrogen or other initiatives kind of mentioned here. So while we talk about sustainable, most of it's focused on just the EVs. Is there any scope for hydrogen, and is that wording a little specific to your thinking? Can I just get a thought on that, please?
Okay, so the term EV in this plan is electric vehicle. A hydrogen is a hydrogen electric vehicle.
Okay.
So even though broadly they're all referred to as EVs, but then you talk about battery electric vehicles, hydrogen electric vehicles, hybrid electric vehicles. So there are variations to that theme of the electric vehicle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. Thanks for clarifying. And I mean, this is already happening. I think it's a great plan. We've got the lawnmowers that are electric getting around at present. Hydrogen for larger trucks, and I know they're fairly early on in the strategy, heavy kind of cars. Has that technology come leaps and bounds like everyone's hoped, or it's still very much in its infancy?
I think the hydrogen is still very much in its research development. There are certainly hydrogen vehicles. Toyota have a fleet of hydrogen vehicles based in Melbourne where they have a recharge facility, and they're doing a lot of trials there. Hyundai have a fleet in Canberra, and again they have a number of trials going on in that space. There's quite a lot of work, particularly in the US, going on with hydrogen and the larger trucks. So we'll just wait and see if they blow themselves up over there first before they come to Australia. There is quite a lot of work going on at the moment. They're building the very first publicly available hydrogen fueling station at Geelong right at the moment, and they're planning on there will be a highway of hydrogen stations from Geelong through to Brisbane. That then will enable the introduction of the trucks. So there's a lot going on in that space, and that's why I'm saying we're at the very beginning of the journey. There's a lot more work to go on in that space.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate your answer. Just perhaps as a comment, I agree. When we sign off on this strategy, we're not getting 1,000 EVs tomorrow. It's in line with budget and time, and infrastructure is the main thing. Then if Canberra and Geelong have it, maybe regional Queensland might be slightly behind that pace, but we welcome it when it gets here. Thank you.
And councillors, you probably all know this, but it's a ever-changing situation, isn't it, Brenda? You know, it's just evolving all the time. I know over in Germany they're putting a lot into hydrogen and other things, but it's just changing all the time. Any other questions, councillors? No? Well, if there's no other questions, would somebody, Councillor Rebecca, would you like to move that? Moved Councillor Von Hoff, seconded Councillor Taylor, Councillor Melissa Taylor, that is. Those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Jed. So we move on to item 4, which is the revised policy road network upgrades and extensions. Is Morag on? Okay, thank you. And I'd like to ask Rodney Betts to come. And Councillor Rebecca, thank you. No, I don't think so, do I? Yes, okay. So Councillor Rebecca, Councillor Von Hoff, who has already declared a declaration of interest in relation to item 4, the revised policy 2.21, road network upgrades and extensions. And Councillor Von Hoff will leave the room. Thank you, Councillor Von Hoff. Is that appropriate? Rod, would you like to come up? Thanks. Councillors, there is a confidential attachment to this report, so we can stay in the outside, but if we do need to move in, we'll have to go into confidential. Thank you. I'll ask our General Manager, Mike Brady, to introduce it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. This report comes further on from what we presented to council back in November and some subsequent information sessions since then, and it follows through on a couple of recommendations that came out of that November report. Obviously, as noted in the background, consultation undertaken, this has been, a lot of elements to getting to where we are today. We've narrowed this down, though, for today, that there was two outcomes that council was trying to get to following its November meeting, and that was a refresh of the council policy 2.21, road network upgrades and extensions, and we've got that there for your consideration and potential adoption today. And obviously the second key one that council's after their resolution back in November was to have some input into the proposed $2 million annual program of upgrades of the Lower Order Road network. So that's what's presented through this. Obviously through the March and April information sessions, council has got some insight and opportunity to give some thoughts in regards to both those points. There's a reasonable amount of detail, obviously, in the report, and how we've got there, the attachments there, the policy is in that public realm space, we're talking about that. The selected roads are in that confidential space because obviously, ultimately, the budget sign-off for the forward years won't happen until council's budget comes down in June, and it's at that time that would give confirmation to be it the suggested program of works here or any other program of works for that matter. So that's why that's in that confidential space for the moment. Councillors, I'll leave it at that, and between myself and Rod, if there's any queries, we'll happy to take questions through your chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brady. Any questions, councillors? Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, thank you very much, to Mike and Rod and Morag, if she's online, for getting to this point. And I think we've had a lot of sessions, a lot of information to get to this point, to where we are today. And you mentioned, Mike, in regard to the confidential list and 5-year initial works. Would that become public after the adoption of the budget, once it's known, and where would people find that information?
Obviously, it's council's call exactly what they want to make into the public realm. So the note of at least I would be suggesting the first year program would be confirmed in that. But council has that right every year when they obviously sign off on the budget to amend. And it's understanding that as the years go forward, there may be reasoning to need to amend that list. There may be priorities may change in council's view and different things like that. So the report actually indicates in the future years that would be confirmed at budget time from an annual perspective. And maybe how you release it as a council, or how we release it as a council, may be subject to confirmation at future budgets. So not locking yourselves in, but at the same time giving people an indication of potential timelines to when their road networks. I suppose the other thing I'd say subject to is understanding lots of things are changing out there, be it developments and other things around our region, but particularly in that peri-urban area of Toowoomba. And some of these roads are in that space, so developers are coming through all the time. And we also know of significant projects, e.g. the Toowoomba to Warwick pipeline project has significant impact on road corridors. So how we integrate with projects such as that will also see how we go forth in regards to some of the roads that are potentially going to be upgraded in future years.
I guess just following on from that, I can understand where you're coming from, Mike, in regard to, subject to and what have you. I just, given the interest and the amount of effort that's gone in to get to this point, and you've got the budget amount, you've now proposed a draft of what that is. I just wonder what downside there would be to actually have that public, subject to the budget confirmation, the first year.
I'm very open to council making things known earlier. But we're just working within normal council protocols as far as budgets are concerned. The confirmation of budget or any project for next financial year and beyond is subject, obviously, to the budget council meeting. So just following that protocol for the moment. If council wishes to make it known earlier, obviously that's council call, and obviously you could indicate that to us today if that was the case.
It's a little different, this, in the sense that the funding's allocated, it is in the budget, and this is now a program of works that's been proposed to come through. So, to me, it would make sense to actually make it known that you've gone through the process. That's my personal opinion, but happy for others to have a think about that. The second part is around the multi-criteria that we've used, and I wonder, it's also in confidential, not the scoring and how that's come about, but just the process of the multi-criteria to make that public, so that the community is aware, right, this is what's taken into account to actually get to that. And I wondered, and you can give that some thought, as to whether we could actually make that part of the report public next week rather than this week, because there's some things that would need redacting or even just leaving out. So the final scoring wouldn't be public, but the multi-criteria and how it's calculated could well be public, just from a transparency situation
Yeah, no, why the attachments in that case, public, yeah, obviously they still have that budgetary element in respect noted within those attachments. The MCA part, I can't see any issue of that becoming into the public realm once council's concurred, should council concur with that, and that be council's thing. You may remember, and I'm happy if there's questions on it, for Rod to tell you, we did bring this forth at the 4th of April session with council, and it got narrowed down to just a couple of, noting that this is the lower order road network, keeping things quite simple, and that was the outcome of, I suppose, the thoughts and ideas that came from that day. So if there's queries in that way, I'll get Rod to speak to that.
Might be something that could be included post next week or at next week's meeting or something.
We could, if you so wish, have a separate attachment, added page in there, that, or as an attached page, which is just on the MCA itself. So that's basically a one-pager. So I could add that to that, which is a non-confidential
That's right.
attachment.
Element of it.
If that is what council so wishes.
That would give the community an idea of how that's worked out.
Councillors, when the budget comes, you have to look at other things, despite the money being there. A lot of things come through council, but they're subject to budget consideration, and this money is in the maintenance area. So I think we should. It's not long. It's only a month away. So,
I'm fully aware of that. I mean, we've confirmed the dollars in the budget, and this is just the draft of and I'm happy for it to still say subject to, but we've got the money. There is a motion, and it's there for the dollars, so it should be right. Next one, if I could, Madam Chair, just is in regard to page 360. Now that might be in confidential, actually. Let me have a look here. No, it's not. Page 360, which was the council decision back in November. The third dot point talks about, prior to the budget delivery, a variety of capital delivery and maintenance methods in an effort to determine a sustainable approach for the rural gravel roads. Now, noting that we've had a couple of sessions on that, would you like to just explain how you have achieved that, as far as benchmarking across other jurisdictions on how that's delivered, and how we've approached the list with that lens on it, item number 3.
Yeah, councillors, I suppose we covered that primarily in the first session in March. In the session in March. Road Construction Maintenance Strategy Workshop Part 1, as noted in the consultation. And we looked at it more from a standards perspective and width and, the constraints and challenges that we work with. And we discussed that in a reasonable amount of detail with councillors at that time. So in that very low order road area, which is what we're talking about here, roads that have well under 30 vehicles a day in the vast majority. We've noted in the policy paper a standard that is a 3.5 metre gravel on a 6.5 metre formation, which is basically very similar to what we had previously. We had 4-on-7 or 4-on-6 pending the geographic and topographical constraints. So there'll still be flexibility that way. But this is also in line with the Institute of Public Works Engineering Queensland Australasia document for lower order roads, which has been a document that has been put together from practitioners across Queensland and across all local governments, and input in very similar circumstances of how it's a challenge across all local governments, not just ourselves, these types of roads, and what is a reasonable base level standard of road type and construction. Obviously, you know, we do aim to do these to have a durability factor to them. We don't want to have to be back, you know, year after year with major maintenance works or anything like that. So it's, looking at items such as drainage elements and stuff must be, sometimes that can be the dearest part of what we've got to put in there. And a couple of those roads that are noted and have been previously noted to council do have some significant creek crossings and the like. And that's a very, you know, we've got to take in a lot of legislative elements as well, fish passageways and the like. And this, for right or wrong, adds to the cost of a lot of the work that we need to do. There's also on these roads, because they're coming from a very basic level, we've got to look at cultural heritage elements, environmental elements. Can be quite a number of different elements of road design that we need to take on board from the start. And obviously we're conscious also in many of the localities of reducing our environmental footprint, so trying not to unnecessarily clear areas. We do find though in our road reserves, be it pipelines or be it power, that tends to probably have equal if not more impact on clearing requirements within the road corridors. So sometimes we go to the extent of protecting it as best we can to then find new power goes in and the clearing happens. It probably covers off on most of that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. So my last point, and it circles back to the first comment I made around the list of names, which is confidential attachment 4, the list of program of works over the next 5 years, proposed program of works, which is subject to budget considerations each year, or program of works each year, whether you can actually have that in full, that page, and it's public, because the numbers certainly would align with the amount of dollars that council has agreed to put aside for those times. But it's something you may have to take back and think about legally before you go ahead and do that.
Yeah. I will note in regards to those figures, as we've given council indications right throughout discussions over the last couple of years, that the dollars against these jobs, because we haven't gone through and done any level of detailed design, are very, very much guesstimates based, as I've said to council, somewhere in that 200 to 400,000 per kilometre, pending locations, pending, you know, the drainage elements and the like. So again, the team have put together a program based on a guesstimate level, very high level, look at these roads of what may be entailed. As we've noted in there that in the majority of cases we want to look at year 1 design, year 2 funding. We may see, and we've also seen holistically, some huge price increasing in construction costs across Australia. I mean, be it the inland rail, be it a local road, 30 to 50% increases over the last couple of years in construction costs are not uncommon in the construction space, in infrastructure works across Australia. So we are cautious, and I'd put this caution note there, that this is on the information that we've been providing council. This is the proposed program. This is what we think could be made up for up to $2 million a year. But you may find, and I'll say potentially highly likely, that there may be some slippage in program if with that $2 million today, you know, with inflation as it is, in 5 years' time, that $2 million might only be equivalent to, you know, $1.5 million in today's dollars, and at the same time, we're finding the construction indices are going up at 10% per annum. So I'm just adding some caution, a cautionable note there, councillors, in how we present this, that, you know, we'll give maybe this is a priority list of works that we'll do over time. This is a good guesstimate of cost at this point in time, but just noting that what it will cost at the end of the day is to be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Tim?
Oh, Chair, look, my question was exactly the same. I think the original motion said $2 million per year over 5 years. Then we're endorsing the 5-year plan, but just for the 23-24 capital works budget. I was going to propose that we extend that to the 5 years and make the whole of attachment 4 public, but I welcome your previously stated answer on that. But I think we could, at the conclusion of this, make attachment 4 somewhat public. But I do have, Chair, some questions regarding attachment 4. So my question is, if I can ask that after all the general questions, I might move us into confidential briefly, just for a few of the things on attachment 4. I appreciate there might be some more questions.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Tim. I've been round a little while, and I think, to release things that we're only sure of, all councillors, when we were amalgamated, had a 10-year capital works program, and some of those people, it's always subject to budget, so it's a bit fraught with danger, as the General Manager has said. Other things might come up that are more urgent at the time on that road network. So I'd urge caution. I don't think what we're sure of should go, but anyway, that's up to council. Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I believe it should go public, and that $2 million. We do have a motion on the books that's $2 million per year for the next 5 years. So I'd be keen to see that made public so that the public are aware of it. And it's good to know now that the costs are all starting to settle, that we're not going to continue to have this sharp rise in costs. So we're hearing that now. But I did wonder, you've made mention of the Toowoomba to Warwick pipeline, and I wondered if that could be a map could be circulated to councillors and that it be attached for next Tuesday's report, please, so that we can understand where that Toowoomba to Warwick pipeline alignment is and see how it impacts these roads which have been mentioned. Thanks.
I don't think it's public. Perhaps we could talk about that, Councillor Summerfield, when we go into confidential.
It can be a confidential document attached like these two are, but it would be good to have that map because it correlates with the commentary. Thanks.
Can I just make a comment? If that's council's wishes, we'll see what information we can provide. My understanding is it's all subject to change, a lot of what's the corridor stuff, so that hasn't been confirmed yet. And council's resolution back in regards to the Toowoomba to Warwick pipeline said there was to be further consultation in regards to a lot of the alignment issues. So we're still waiting for some of that, Rod. We are involved in some discussions there, but that's all sort of in progress as well. But if that's a request of council, we'll see what information's currently available.
Thank you. And it'd be the proposed alignment, so we'd understand that. Thank you.
Councillor, is there any other questions in open? Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just probably I just want to add, I agree with it being made public, and purely for the reason that I guess I understand other priorities and things can come up, and that we may think that's fraught with danger. But I think the biggest reasoning, I suppose, around wanting to almost quarantine having $2 million a year for this was because, like we always say, the overall picture of our road network, because of the different metrics that we worked upon, these never made it above the line or in terms of where they sat in the priorities. So I think it was about highlighting that this level of road and having them being prioritised, the money's there to do these works prioritised against each other. So I probably would, so just to add, I think it's probably a really important step in terms of, because we've told a lot of these roads that we're talking about here in the past that, on our priorities and where they sit, that they don't, that there are other higher priorities than it. So I think it's an important step actually that even if it's that first year or whatever level of works or 5 year that we do make it public, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor O'Shea. As we said, we'll draft up a document or something that you may wish to see be the public document. I'm thinking that we might just write in the road name and the year that it may be constructed. Just in regards to confirmation of budget, and why we say, one of the other reasons we say that is that we get these requests all the time. We've actually got something in the order of 50 requests on the books, and as you note within the report, we're only covering off around about 20, not even 20 roads there, and some are excluded for other reasoning, and there's notes in there that indicate why. So council may find once this program becomes, inverted commas, a little bit more in that public realm beyond what's already there, and it's noted out there, you may also be getting more requests over the next few years that you may wish to suggest for consideration in the program, and may see as a higher priority than one or two of those roads that are already in the program. So that cautious note is there, but that's council's call ultimately, and happy to work with council on as and when if those circumstances arise. But I suppose I'll just flag that as well.
Okay, if there are no more questions for open session.
Sorry, Madam
Councillor
Chair,
McDonald.
just before we go there, I'm just wondering whether it's not dissimilar to a previous item we mentioned before, to make sure that you get the right information that you can put in open session, that you do actually seek some other advice. But from my perspective, this is a document that, providing it has that disclaimer on it, the figures that are in there add up to the amount that we've said we'd allocate for, given that it could change. But I think open and transparent around this is, it's nice for the community to actually know how much these things cost now with what we've got, to be honest, because we'll hand down a budget and it becomes public. If you want to look deep enough into it, you'll find it. So I'd be inclined, and we can give this some thought, and if we need further discussion in close, we could, but I'd be inclined to either defer and come back with what we need, or add an item 3, which includes that the multi-criteria assessment for formed and unformed roads is made public, the assessment, that'd be 3, and number 4, the proposed initial 5-year works program for low order upgrades is made publicly available. Those 2 items were added to that, but we can talk about that in closed if we need to. But Wendy, that's probably just a bit of a heads up for there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Sorry, Madam Chair, Mike, just on the point you made before, I understand what you're saying that others might prop up, but I mean, in terms of, I suppose, is that necessarily a bad thing, I suppose? Like, I mean, hopefully there's others that are out there, and I mean, now, if this is publicly and people see that this road or that road, and as Councillor McDonald said, what it costs, and they feel that theirs should or shouldn't be in there that we're unaware of, well, then it goes through the same we can say it goes through this exact same process as what this is, and yeah, absolutely, if all of a sudden one is discovered for whatever reason and it fits higher in the priority, well, so be it.
But perhaps because they've virtually thought that they were promised their road, and this has happened when you do this before in other councils and this council as well, when it's been put out there that this is being considered and that list's put out there, they'll think that's a finite list. And when they've virtually been promised a road and another road comes in, then that's a difficulty to deal with.
But I think that's the way. Sorry, Madam Chair. Yeah, I respect that, but I think it's at the same time that's also an open and fair sort of process, I suppose, that people might even, as you've sort of said many times, those that have been silent about this might even be aware that there's the possibility that there is this opportunity through this work. So I think it has a lot of benefits. And as we've said, the other was what we've always said with this scenario. I mean, we've got the situation of now, what we've got, and how to prevent it moving forward into the future. So realistically, it's always going to be the past, the past legacies, as we said, because moving forward, the changes we are able to implement so that we don't reach this sort of situation. So I guess I think there's, as I said, I think that's a positive step in my opinion, if it's out there, and if others come forward, as I said, we've now got a process and we've got a criteria set that's public and people understand how it works, and this is where they rank. So I actually think it's has more benefit than the reverse, in my opinion.
Councillors, you might have missed the fact that at the end of 5 years, 2 million will be probably not much over 1 million, and road costs are going up, and I don't know where you're going to find yourself, but anyway. If there are no more questions, Mike, you didn't want to answer that, no?
Look, council will have that opportunity each year through the budget process, because we'll bring this program to council going forward. At this stage, I'll say at this stage, we won't be looking at a separate report. We'll be just bringing it in as part of the budget papers, capital programs, and we'll indicate the next group of roads that are to be indicated there. And should council in those discussions in future years believe something else should come in or whatever change, obviously that's council's call of the day. Happy to work with that.
So if there are no more questions, I'll ask for somebody to move into closed session. Thanks. Councillor McDonald, Councillor McMahon, those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. So can I have a mover, please? There's the motion, that the matter be deferred for further consideration at the ordinary meeting of council on Tuesday the 16th of May. So you want to leave the whole item, you don't want to do the policy?
I'm happy to move that as it is,
All
Madam
right.
Chair.
Thank you. Moved Councillor McDonald, seconded Councillor Summerfield. Those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. That brings to a division. Thank you. Yes, we need a division. Sorry, it's only it's only committee, but we still need a division because there's a conflict. So those in favour? It's carried. That's everyone who's in the room. That brings to a close our committee meeting for May 2023. Thank you, councillors. Thanks, Mike, Rodney and Wendy and Brian. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to thank the comms in the room as well. Thank you. Thanks, Jason.